know it's crazy, but it's
You're watching Channel Z, the world's leading zombie apocalypse channel, broadcasting live from Studio Z.
Makes me act the way I do.
Welcome to Eat, Pray, Run, where slow food in the apocalypse doesn't mean you're ending up on the menu. Today we are joining you from ASU's Innovation Quarter. I'm Dr. Erica O'Neill, and today we'll be discussing the sense of smell, holiday memories, and zombies with our return guests, olfaction expert Ann Barwich and cognitive scientist Peter Todd. But first, I'd like to introduce the host of Eat, Pray, Run, Dr. Rob Dunn.
Hey, great to be back as always.
Yes, Rob, what do the holidays smell like to you in Copenhagen?
Well, I'm a little stuffy right now, so I think apropos of our show today, not very much. Although in Copenhagen, it always smells a little bit like bacon, so bacony.
A bacony holiday. There you go. Breakfast in the morning every day. So what are we going to be talking about today, Rob?
We're going to be talking about anosmia. The inability to smell. When does it occur? Why does it occur? How does it affect how we relate to other species? All things about the nose.
Awesome. So let's bring on an expert that can tell us what the pronunciation is of anosmia, one or the other. It's our first guest, Dr. Ann Barwich, who studies olfaction and cognitive science at Indiana University. Ann, sense of smell is something that's often overlooked. What is your nose telling you right now, or are you anosmic?
So, well, I feel almost like it for the very simple reasons that not much is happening in my flat right now. I think I've never been so excited about the smell of burnt coffee. Because what happens if you're staying inside the same room after a while is that your receptors actually adapt to the smells around you. So this is why you don't smell your own home. And this is why if you stay at home during the zombie apocalypse for weeks and months by now, even burnt coffee is exciting, something new for your nose.
That's amazing. So this isn't my first question at all, but now I have to ask it. Does that mean that with smell, there's an extent to which traveling, moving, eating different things is necessary in order for it to richly experience, your nose to richly experience the world?
Well, it definitely helps because one thing is, at least if you're in the same room, you've got both the receptors adapting, but also like they habituate, they adapt, but also the brain at some point goes like, well, I know this, I'm not doing anything new. And you might wonder why. Like, why don't we constantly smell something? This is what we're constantly unconscious of, all the molecules around us. Well, you would be begging for lobotomy if you were aware of every smell all the time, because you're constantly surrounded by hundreds and hundreds of molecules. And this is so much information, you would be like a dog, constantly somewhat distracted by smells. You couldn't think of much anything else, actually. But traveling, for instance, through to different places and having new foods is definitely a new sensory experience. So you gain a richer qualitative experience of the world. And also the receptors in your nose, they're constantly being newly expressed in terms of got a regeneration of the sensory neurons in which these receptors are in your nose. And if you move around, let's say move around, which you shouldn't do right now with COVID, but if you could, you would actually notice that after a while, you've got a different receptor expression pattern. So you literally are accommodating the chemical environment, or you are accommodating to the chemical environment.
So I mean, in a way, it means that like your chemical environment and your body are part of some bigger interaction. They're dancing.
It's an ecological tango. Yeah, it's a very nice tango between you and the environment. And you've got a flexible system that goes, oh, well, she should smell that.
Well, so Athena's got a question here that relates to the tango in her house. So are there individual differences in how quickly people habituate to smells? And so I don't know why she's asking, but imagine it's because her fridge is full of fermented food and she's habituated to it, but not the rest of her family. Is this possible?
Well, so the fun thing is that even in your nose, the different receptors, humans have between 350 and 400 different receptors. They don't habituate at the same speed. So different receptors adapt to different smells at different speeds. So that's why if you've got a complex mixture, like a perfume, for instance, your nose will adapt to different parts of this mixture at different speeds. That's why after a while it starts to smell differently also very quickly. So like, oh, this was like this, and then wait, there's this note suddenly coming through. But the next thing is why, for instance, people will have different speeds of adaptation indeed. It's not just because they've got different speeds of adaptation within their nose, but also we don't have the same receptor expression pattern in our noses. Every human literally has an unique individual receptor expression pattern when it comes to receptors, like the olfactory receptors. Receptors
Amazing.
quite a lot of times.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And so let's bring this back to our moment. So in the context of COVID, we're seeing all sorts of stories come out about COVID and anosmia. How do I say it?
Anosmia.
Anosmia. So it's like
I
your
might
name.
mispronounce it as well because I've got too many accents being thrown together in how I talk.
All right. Well, we'll just be very happy with it, however anyone says it today. But so why is COVID changing how people smell the world? What's the relationship here? What do we know? What are the symptoms? Walk us through it.
So the interesting thing actually with anosmia is that during COVID, that was one of the key first discoveries. So that anosmia basically means you are unable to smell. Then you also have a couple of other smell dysfunctions as part of COVID. And I should say that up to 80% of people that have been diagnosed with COVID can actually have reported some form of anosmia, like I can't smell things. However, smell dysfunctions, like you smell less. Somehow your sense of smell is muted. You still smell something, but it's muted. Hyposmia is also one of the smell dysfunctions. You've got paraosmia, which means that suddenly normal smells are distorted and quite often in a bad way. So it can be that your coffee, for instance, starts to smell like gasoline or...
Wait, which one is that? That's paraosmia?
Paraosmia, yes. Paraosmia is that things that have a certain smell suddenly are distorted. They have a distorted smell. And quite often it's really bad smells that come across. Then there's phantosmia, which is really bad. It's that you're imagining smells. Like you smell certain things that are not there, which is never a good sign. I mean, hallucinations never are a good sign, but with smell, it's a really, it's a good indicator that there's some kind of neurological dysfunction. And these are the different dysfunctions linked to COVID, for instance. The reasons for that. So what's going on? The short answer is, well, we don't 100% know. The longer answer is we have a couple of different explanations. And 2020 has at least catapulted smell for that reason into scientific consciousness, you could say. One assumption is, for instance, one current explanation for paraosmia is that what happens here is, for instance, that when the sensory neurons, which contain the receptors, which are really in the epithelium on the top of your nose, that they rewire, they miswire. So they're somehow doing the regeneration, some kind of miswiring going on. Then when it comes to anosmia, so the inability to smell, what's often happening is that people assume, well, the support cells in the epithelium there might be an inflammation that leads to that. So these are kind of some of the explanations, at least. But there is still a lot of research to be done. What's going on here? So you could say anosmia and paraosmia and all these other smell dysfunctions have, of course, existed prior to COVID, but COVID at least brought it up to the table that people were like, oh, we should understand more of it. So people who have been suffering from that prior to COVID now get a bit more attention, at least.
Well, so the questions are pouring in relative to this. So first off, Pam wants to know if you have anosmia or you have one of the other osmias, are there ways to retrain your nose to bring its function back? Another question is it true that dogs have many more receptors than us? Is it true that there are other diseases that are associated with anosmia? They keep rolling in, but they're all sort of related on this theme. And I think relate to this idea that smell, although we don't talk about it so much, is really fundamental to us, fundamental to the richness of our lives and our experience. So go for it.
Okay, these are several questions. So, okay, remind me of the questions I might have forgotten. But the dogs have over 800 receptors, so they definitely have more than humans. Then your question about what can we actually do when it comes to smell loss, there has been some evidence showing that targeted intense smell training can actually help improve the sense of smell, recuperate the sense of smell after illness. And if you have such a thing, there are a couple of charities who started offering smell training. So they show you how to do it. And it's fun to do, but it's also quite intense. And some of them in the UK are, for instance, Absent. So ABSCNT, kind of a nice pun, or fifth sense. And there's also one just actually coming, which was just founded in North America by Katie Boateng. So she also has the Nose Smell podcast. And there are a couple of places where you can look, how do we do that? They also offer smell tests, smell test kits, so where you have certain aromatic oils and you test, can you identify them? What if you increase the concentration? Can you arrange them according to different concentrations? It's intense, and you sometimes really have to do it regularly for several minutes a day. And it's not always, but it can help recuperate the sense of smell. There was another question which I now forgot. I'm sorry.
Well, I think there are two more. Well, there are a bunch of questions here, but so one has to do with are there other diseases that also cause anosmia? So stroke was the question. Is that common? Yeah, go for it, Anne.
Absolutely. So the thing with anosmia is there are so many different causes. Some people, for instance, you can have a head trauma, because that can also lead to anosmia. So if you've got an accident, and what happens here is you've got the cribriform plate in your nose, and it has very, very thin holes through which the sensory neurons kind of get into the brain, and like a knife, it basically, a strong accident might just cut them off, and sometimes they don't grow back. So that is an issue that can be part of it. You can also have other causes when it comes to, for instance, some people are anosmic by birth, so there might be some genetic causes. So there's a variety of issues. You can also, it's not just for anosmia, but you can also have the same issue with paraosmia. So that things start to smell bad can be a side effect of medication, for instance, certain drugs, for instance, that might handle seizures, etc. You can have brain tumors that can be the cause of that. So there's a variety of reasons. And that's why if you have a smell dysfunction, always go back to the context in which, like the organism, like it's often a symptom of something the organism is dealing with. It's not an isolated cause.
That is a wonderful segue to our next guest, because we have the unique kind of smell capacities of zombies that we're also talking about today, which are humans, but a different version of humans. So let me bring on Dr. Peter Todd. Peter is the director of the Cognitive Science program at Indiana University. Peter, do you have any research updates on zombie food choice and sense of smell since we last chatted at ZAM 2020?
Absolutely. Here in the Zombie Food Project, we have been working hard to try to make sense of what it is that zombies do and don't like to eat. And as I reported last time, it certainly is the case that they make food choices, and one of the things that they choose not to eat is other zombies, rotting flesh. And so we have been exploring what is keeping them from doing that, and the sense that we have focused on is the sense of smell. And so working with Anne, we've been talking a lot about what are the ways that the sense of smell may have changed in zombies, or could be changed in zombies to some end that we might want to use it for.
So can you talk more about that, Peter? How might we manipulate our own, or the aromas we produce, or the sense of smell in zombies to our advantage?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the first thing that we tried was the first one that you just said, changing our own smell so that we are not appealing to zombies. So we worked on developing some perfumes, so to speak, that you can spray on yourself and make you smell like rotting flesh, so that zombies will avoid coming after you. That didn't prove super popular with our test subjects, so we decided we would go to the other end of the equation.
It must have had such amazing moments, though, right? That you walk outside with the perfume and suddenly carrion beetles and flies. You're like Saint Francis of the nearly dead. Yeah,
that's right. Vultures. There were definitely problems with attracting the wrong kinds of species interest for the people wearing these odors.
One person's problem is another person's success, I guess. There, but yeah,
exactly. So we went after the other end, which is changing how zombies perceive their smell world. And what we tried first was there are some microbes that if you spray them or get them into the nasal cavities of zombies or living humans, that they themselves can produce odors, for instance, butyric acid, which smells like vomit, which then clouds the olfactory perception of the zombie or a living human. And so that was one way that we started seeing if we could scramble zombies' olfactory sense. Another way, though, has been inspired by some of the effects of the COVID virus. And so we've been looking at, could we use COVID virus to give zombies anosmia so that they can't smell anything, can't differentiate between different things, and that could be a way of changing what they are after. There's also some other exciting new directions I can tell you about later where we're going beyond just anosmia, but we've started with that.
But so the idea there is that they would no longer be attracted to us. We wouldn't smell attractive to them. All their food world would be bland.
That's right.
But would they then have to take a bite of us before they decided? I mean, how important is orthonasal smell versus retronasal here? Is it sniffing or is it chewing?
So we don't know that yet. That is part of the things that we have to try to figure out. I think that they still seem to be making food choices, and so they're not sure what things to eat, and that leads them to try whatever is around that could potentially be a prey item. So that doesn't get living humans out of the woods yet. That's why we have gone on to some further techniques that try to make them actually uninterested in going after humans.
And so those, where are you in those tests? What's the next experiment?
Yeah, so this gets us to the paraosmia. So that is getting zombies or whatever smelling entities we're talking about to missmell something. So there's an aroma that they may have been attracted to, but now they get repulsed by. So for instance, as Anne said earlier, switching from smelling coffee to now it smells to you like gasoline, you don't want to ingest that at all. We're working on genetically modified COVID-Z viruses that would give that kind of paraosmia to zombies so that living humans no longer smell attractive to them. They smell like rotting flesh to the zombies, and that keeps them from going after the living humans. It's very tricky. There was a question, I think, from Carlo about what's in it for the viruses to make us smell something wrong. And that is, that question there. I'm very puzzled by that as well, especially why would the viruses make things that we could eat smell bad? That seems to be detrimental for the host organism, and then it would be detrimental for the virus trying to spread to other hosts as well. We're trying to puzzle that out.
There's actually some precedent for this in the context of the parasite Toxoplasma gondii, which infects mice and rats, but can only have sex in cats. And so it's been shown that mice and rats that are infected with the parasite are no longer scared of the smell of cat pee. But as far as I know, it's not understood what actually happens to trigger that change. And so I wonder if it's not something like this, that the parasite is somehow manipulating or just dulling the aroma receptors.
But then you would think that it would make the host go towards other potential hosts, right? That would be a way of the virus spreading itself. And
oh no, so the parasite wants in a perfect for the parasite would make it actually attracted to cat pee, but maybe that's one trick too many. Maybe dulling the fear is enough.
Yeah, and so we are playing around with those things. The zombie cat population is actually also pretty large, so we're able to try to do some of those experiments with zombie cats and zombie mice as well, and see how the smell interacts there and can lead to those kinds of reversed prey interactions.
That's fascinating. I'm going to bring on our olfaction expert again to join you guys in the conversation. What do you think about the zombie cat experiments that are underway at the Indiana University Cognitive Science Labs?
Oh, they're very exciting, but I gotta say, I was reminded of an episode in Star Trek: The Next Generations, where one of the viral infections was indeed transmitted through. Oh, there's this kind of nice smell, so people were getting closer to others and inhaling it, and it took them a while to figure out that all the kind of people who were infected had actually this wonderful, nice smell. So I have to just say, like, it was The Next Generation. Don't ask me which season it was, but there was definitely we have this kind of hypothesis already, so to speak, in popular culture. But when it comes to, for instance, cat piss, etc., what we need to understand, of course, is to what extent we can overrule certain behavioral, you could say, reactions to certain things. And one thing what is quite exciting, of course, with the research that Peter and I are doing, is that we might not only be affecting on to what extent you might alter the zombie sense of smell and kind of figure out new behaviors, but potentially also make them eat each other, perhaps, because not just humans might actually smell bad, but one of Peter's recent discoveries was we might make them smell actually quite delicious to each other. So we turn the problem into a solution.
Exactly. So that would be the holy grail, is switching the paraosmia from getting the zombies to think that something that they used to find smelling good now smells repulsive to them. That's what we're currently working on. To getting them to think that something that used to smell repulsive to them, which is other zombies, now smells like delicious baked bread, and now they're going to go after the other zombies. And if we can get that to spread through the population of zombies, then problem solved. They eat each other, and we can finally be beyond this pandemic.
Yeah, we've got two relevant comments here. So one's from Carlo Malley, who says it would be really helpful if they were taking a bite out of each other all the time if their smell world was scrambled.
Yeah.
And so, if it's just scrambled, they're eating each other. But the other question was an earlier one, and it was about, are there universally attractive aromas for humans? And so that question's for Anne, but it relates to Peter's work as well. And that, should we be worried that what if the zombies are able to make themselves smell attractive to us? So what if they're able to produce huge quantities of some aroma that we find innately appealing, and we know that we shouldn't go outside, but it smells so good out there where they are, and we just walk toward them? Is this a concern?
So one thing I should say is that when it comes to liking or disliking or pleasant or unpleasant odors, there is no generality or universality. It's incredibly flexible. So one thing is, for instance, that there are certain odors which we generally conceive of as pleasant, but in a specific context, you might actually get a reverse reaction or kind of an adverse reaction because you might have a bad experience with it. So it's not that there's in the chemical something that intrinsically makes them good or bad, but it is linked to behavior, it is linked to context. So the same molecules in different contexts will elicit a different reaction, actually. So you might think you might have something like indole, which has naturally, like individually, a very fecal smell. You think, well, that's clearly a bad odor. Well, then smell your coffee, because indole is part of coffee. So one of the things with these kind of things, like, I just ruined coffee for you. So
You did. I'm going to lean into it, though.
Oh, yes. And enjoy the fecal smell. So this is where it's always a bit difficult to say they're universal good smells or universal bad smells. And actually, culturally, there are also some differences that you get used to certain smells. And especially when it comes to food choices, you can say almost every culture has one particular dish that is considered gross, like really gross and unappetizing and stinky, from another culture's perspective, whether that is, for instance, let's say rotten fish, or whether that is the Germans like blood sausage, which I gotta say, it's really good, or kind of different things where everybody else like, why would you eat that? So there's a familiarity that might change also how you perceive smells, and that might actually make it trickier for zombies to trick us, because we might at some point just behaviorally adjust to certain smells. They think like, oh, maybe humans find that sexy. Nah, maybe not. After a while, it might work for a while, but at some point, our behavior response is going to adapt.
So we might not be too smart to outwit zombies in general, but in the context of smell, our ability to learn aroma might be sufficiently clever. Yeah, Peter, do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah. So this is one of the risks that some of our critics have raised that if we, not that the zombies themselves would start making chemicals that smell a particular way to us, but if our proposed method of spreading the COVID-Z virus around to zombies to give them paraosmias by which rotting flesh now smells like something delicious, if those then reinfect humans, we could end up with us thinking that rotting flesh smells delicious, and consequently, this would be sort of like the rats going towards cat pee, that we may be then attracted to zombies as a consequence of that. I think that those kinds of concerns are overblown. I mean, what could be the worst thing that could happen? We get some of the living humans more interested in eating zombie flesh, which, as we talked about last time, is actually another goal of the Zombie Food Project, to help us to create a more sustainable food source for the living humans.
So we have a comment that kind of ties into your last answer then. Athena is wondering, if we're messing with the sense of smells, are we making it so that humans are approaching a broader range of humans as well than they would otherwise? So a lot of times in the zombie apocalypse, you're very sort of secular with your Z team and your group. So is it also something where we're creating a more cooperative zombie apocalypse, perhaps, through sense of smell?
Hopefully. I mean, the good thing, at least with the sense of smell, is you need people with different forms of expertise. As Rob earlier said, you've got insects, so you might have like the attraction of insects. So you might actually want to have somebody who knows a bit of the outdoors and biology and zoology. You might need chemists, you might need psychologists, you need to have behavioral biologists. So the good thing is it will require cooperation, and smell is so kind of multifaceted in the way you can study it. So it might really help us to establish a cooperative human response to the zombie apocalypse, indeed.
I mean, I guess the flip side is to wonder if smell learning also has the potential to facilitate xenophobia. I mean, does learning our own community smell and learning disgust for other communities' smells play into xenophobia that we see around the world in the context of zombies or more generally?
Unfortunately, it does actually. So the sense of smell, if you look at the history of culture and society, has often been used to propagate stereotypes about them and the others. So about racial stereotypes, about cultural stereotypes. Quite often, smell was used, especially when it came to cultures that then had lots of immigration, immigrants, for instance, that they were othered through, oh, they have this kind of weird sense of smell, quite often connected either to body odor or to their food. So like, for instance, garlic, which now, of course, is liked a lot. But there were times when garlic was not popular in certain cultures, such as, for instance, England, but also in Germany, that garlic was like from the others. And unfortunately, this is still sometimes the case, that you also have it not just with different cultures, but you also have it even with different classes. So if you look historically, the working class was often kind of neglected or othered through like, oh, they have this kind of bad smell, this kind of smoky smell, they don't smell well, they don't smell good. So unfortunately, smell has been used in a bad sense and politicized. Yes.
So maybe there's a sense in which, as we think about the future, that being willing to learn to appreciate new smells, whether that's the smells of zombies, the smells of other people's, the smells in our daily lives, is a way of being in the world that it embraces the diversity of aromas around us. Is that a...
I love that. I love that take. And what is also quite nice is that you might also appreciate the diversity of smells, not just in terms of that you can smell, because otherwise, like if you lose your sense of smell, in terms of if you turn into a zombie, you realize actually that all these kind of differences in people's like aroma production, body odor versus food culture, etc., is actually something good, because it means you're still not a zombie. If you lose it, you might realize something is happening. I'm transforming into a zombie. So in that case, see a doctor. Don't eat the doctor, just see a doctor. But also when it comes to ourselves, as long as we're not smelling of rotten flesh, I think we all are actually fine.
Well, so we can end on the note of being grateful for those of us who have anosmia, and for those of us suffering anosmia, we're going to share some links of where people can go to get some help in finding their way back with their noses. Peter?
The smell world, I think, even if you don't have anosmia, it's great to get more practice in it and to help us to appreciate the wider range of the experience out there. This is, for instance, the kind of kit that you can get, which has a whole bunch of different aromas from wines, and you can practice them, and you can also just do the old-fashioned way.
Fantastic. Thank you for bringing back around to holidays and celebrating with a glass of wine and family. And thank you all for being on Eat, Pray, Run today. It was really fascinating and wide-ranging episode, just like Athena had commented.
It was good to see you.
Thanks, everybody.
And thanks you to everybody out there for sampling our brains today on Eat, Pray, Run. You can join us for a question and answer session as part of Arizona State University's Innovation Quarter directly after this live stream. The link will be posted in the comments section on both YouTube and our Facebook live streams, so that you just have to click on that. You can also register at innovation.asu.edu if you'd like to register for our course shell so that you can get updates on future episodes as part of Innovation Quarter. Until next time, eat well and enjoy the holidays.
I know it's crazy, but it's
You're watching Channel Z, the world's leading zombie apocalypse channel, broadcasting live from Studio Z.
makes me act the way I do.